On the morning of April 29, 1986, one of the most challenging structure fires in the history of the Los Angeles Fire Department occurred at the Los Angeles Central Library, 630 West 5th Street. 9/11 was called at 10:52 hours. First units arrived at 10:56 hours and fight until knockdown at 18:30 hours. Extinguishing this blaze required assistance from virtually every element of the department, including 60 firefighting companies, 1 arson unit, 9 paramedic rescue ambulances, 3 helicopters, 4 salvage companies, 1 squadron, 2 emergency air units, a heavy utility company, and 40 staff and support personnel, for a total of almost 350 fire department personnel. An estimated loss of $2 million to the structure and $20 million to the contents occurred. The more important fact is that 85% of the total value of the structure and content were saved. This in a building that the national experts on library fires, as well as a former LAFD chief engineer, predicted would be a complete loss if a fire of this type ever occurred. One factor that helped prevent the loss from being larger was the recognition of the implementation of salvage operations early in the fire. Out of over 1.2 million books that were in the library at the time of the fire, only 350,000 received any fire or water damage. Because of the construction and design of the building, there was no practical way to ventilate the heat and smoke from the involved areas. This and the fact that the building itself acted as a heat sink to hold the heat long after the fire was out, combined to make penetration into the fire areas extremely difficult. Access to the tires where the fire was located was limited to 4 narrow 36-inch wide stairways and 1 window. The biggest issue that needed the most deployment on the fireground assists ventilation, interior attack, and salvage. The assignments were to provide ventilation for the fire area, rotation of members of the fire attack teams that were taking a beating from the tremendous heat buildup, and salvage the content of the library. Ventilation Division continued efforts to ventilate the northeast stack area. Windows and skylights were opened or broken out to effect ventilation with little or no positive results. The 16-inch thick reinforced concrete walls, 6 thick steel reinforced concrete roofs, and floors combined with a lack of vertical or horizontal passages made ventilation almost impossible. Using sledgehammers and axes, the Ventilation Division is able to breach the roof but are unable to open a hole large enough for effective ventilation. Jackhammers and heavy equipment were brought in. As mentioned earlier, one of the biggest successes of this fire was how much was salvaged, because salvage operations were started early on at 11:20 a.m. and continued throughout the event. Polyethylene plastic and salvage covers was used to cover bookshelves and furniture. Sawdust was used to direct water out of the building. Supply and Maintenance delivers 13 blowers, 50 bags of sawdust which were used to direct water out of the building, and 30 rolls of plastic to the fire. Because of the narrow hallways and thick walls trapping so much heat in them, it was hard to advance attack crews. Rotating personnel was essential. Crews had to be rotated every 15 to 20 minutes due to the heat and smoke they were experiencing. But as the fire progressed, fire attack teams are taking a real beating from the heat and must be rotated every 10 to 15 minutes and then under 1 minute. There are reports from members of the attack teams that the metal on the bookshelves were bright red from the heat. This is a general layout of the structure of the ICS, Incident Command System. This is a standardized approach to the command, control, and coordination of emergency response, providing a common hierarchy with which responders from multiple agencies can be effective. As listed, Chief Drummond was the incident commander, Chief Anthony is assigned operations, Chief DeFell was assigned logistics, Chief Fasano was assigned the medical director, and Chief Kate was assigned planning. 10:56 to 1300 hours. At 11:30 hours, this is when it is identified that the fire was contained in the northeast stack. For most of the fire efforts were mainly concentrated in the northeast stack area. There were chief's concerns of a possible flashover due to the tremendous heat buildup in the northeast stack area below the 3rd floor. At 11:45 hours, Chief Paramedic Fasana arrived on scene and a medical division was established. There were multiple attempts at ventilation, but it was not very effective. Fire attack Teams throughout the building continue encountering the same problem: extremely high temperatures, heavy smoke, narrow aisles, and very limited access. After the fire burning 2 hours, there are now 34 fire companies, 12 command and staff officers, 1 air ambulance, and 7 rescue ambulances committed to the incident. 1,300 hours to 1,400 hours. The 6th and 7th tier in the northwest stack collapse. Chief Anthony calls a planning meeting and divides the building into 4 divisions. Each division includes a stack in approximately 1/4 of the building. At 13:44 hours, operations gives the order to remove everyone from the area in the northwest end of the building for heavy stream operations. 14:30 hours to 1,500 hours. Fire attacks continue in the northwest stack. Crews are rotated every 15 minutes and very slow progression is made due to the extreme heat and limited access to the fire area. More emphasis is being placed on ventilation and on salvage efforts. There is still a great deal of difficulty in advancing hand lines due to the extreme heat that has been built up inside of the building. The concrete walls continue to retain heat even in areas where the fire has been knocked down. 1530 to 1600 hours. Heavy utility 27 under direction of Chief Lucarelli continues jackhammering holes through floor on the 3rd floor to ventilate the fire area. As each hole is open, large volumes of heat and smoke are released under pressure. Members working on the jackhammers are required to wear full protective gear, including breathing apparatuses and earmuffs. Blowers are used for cross ventilation to help keep the smoke and heat away from the jackhammer crews. The floors were so hot that when water was applied to cool the area down, the water would actually boil. 18 holes were eventually jackhammered through the 6-inch thick concrete steel reinforced floor in order to ventilate the fire below. As the ventilation efforts start to become effective, fire attack teams are able to make slow progress into the fire area. 1,600 hours and forward. The ventilation efforts allows attack teams to advance and knock down by the fire. By 1630 hours, Division B, C, and D report that all fire in the areas have been knocked down and crews are being removed. The efforts are then concentrated on salvage. There are now 60 firefighting companies, 40 command and staff personnel, 11 support apparatuses, 9 rescue ambulances, 3 helicopters, and 1 arson unit assigned to this incident. Strategy and tactics. Concentrated attacks were on the northeast stack. Build up of tremendous heat in the walls actually forced the firefighter teams to be replaced every 15 minutes. Ventilation on the roof was so unsuccessful. Master streams were used on the northeast stack from Flower Street. This was very effective because this cooled the building, which let heavy unit go and make holes on the 3rd floor to release the heat. Finally, the fire was contained and the crews were able to begin salvage. Lesson learned. Although a total of 85% of the total value of the building structure was saved, more concentrated efforts, focused efforts on ventilation would have helped minimize the lost values. A quicker response time and ventilation efforts could have potentially decreased thousands of more dollars in damage.